The ricotta you buy at the store is fine, but it's not great. It's either too dry, it's too wet, it has sometimes like a gritty texture, and for some reason they put all sorts of fillers and thickeners in it. I'm not even sure if it's really cheese. So I started making my own. This is the easiest cheese you can make at home.
Let's spend time with Marco, but the food is the star, so it's probably worth sharing.
Hello, I'm Marco, and welcome to my home kitchen. Today I want to show you how to make whole milk ricotta cheese. It takes less than half an hour, and the results are going to blow away your expectations for what ricotta cheese can be. It is smooth, rich, creamy. It melts in your mouth. This is the cheese that lasagna has dreams about. You can also use this recipe to make cottage cheese. It's basically the same thing. It's a super easy recipe. The only thing you need is milk and some kind of an acid. When it comes to milk, whole milk is best. 2% is fine. Skim is okay, but unpredictable. What you really want to look for though is how the milk was pasteurized. You can't use ultra high temperature pasteurized milk. UHT milk is heated to 275 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit to completely sterilize the milk. That means it's shelf stable. You can leave it out at room temperature up until you open it, but it is not great if you want to make cheese at home. For the acid, I prefer white wine vinegar because it has a predictable level of acid and a relatively pleasant taste when it's used in ricotta. White vinegar tends to remind me of cleaning products, and while the lemons taste the best, each lemon has a different level of acid. So it's fairly unpredictable what your cheese is going to turn out like. You also have the option of adding salt as you're making the cheese. You're going to cook them in a ratio of 1 liter of milk needs 20 milliliters of acid, which is going to create 250 grams of fresh cheese. For the recipe today, I'm using 2 liters of milk, so I got 500 grams of cheese. Cheese making is about temperature control. So you want to use a large, heavy bottom pot like this one so that you can keep a constant, even temperature through the process. You're also going to need a digital thermometer and something to stir with. To get started, you want to pour all of the milk into the pot and slowly bring it up to the coagulation temperature. Referencing my handy virtual thermometer on your right, in my imagination, is the target temperature we're looking for to make cheese. The acid will get introduced once the milk hits 185 degrees, and then you're going to cook it for another 20 minutes to develop the ricotta flavor. And for that, you want to keep it between 175 and 195 degrees. You want to heat this slowly and evenly. It'll take about 5 to 7 minutes on medium-low heat. If you try to rush this and you put it on medium-high or high heat, you run the risk of the milk sugars burning to the bottom of the pan or overshooting the milk coagulation temperature and then not being able to form cheese. If at any point you feel a texture forming at the bottom of the pot, like it feels like velvet or a little bit slick, that means the milk is starting to burn on the bottom of the pot. Lower your temperature, go a bit slower, just don't scrape what's on the bottom of the pot because that is going to taste burnt. Everything above it is still fine. One of the signs you're getting close to the target temperature is that steam starts to come off the milk and you can smell warm milk in the air. You want to stir quite often here, make sure you're checking the temperature, and try not to overshoot that 185 degrees. I've just hit 185 degrees, so I'm going to turn the heat down while I put the acid in. I have 2 liters of milk, so I'm adding 40 milliliters of white wine vinegar. I'm first going to create a vortex so it's evenly distributed. Then switch to a figure 8 motion going the opposite direction and make 2 figure 8s. You can also add in salt. I would recommend you do this before you curdle it. I just completely forgot in the course of making this recipe. At this point, it's fresh cottage cheese. So you can take it off the stove, strain it, and then after it's strained, add in 1 tablespoon of fresh cream for every liter of milk that you started with. If you're making this into ricotta cheese, you now want to cook it for 20 minutes to build that ricotta flavor. That means keeping it between 175 and 195 degrees for 20 minutes to give it that cooked milk taste that a true ricotta would have. If you're making a volume of cheese, which you should because it's the same amount of work if you're going to make 1 liter or 4 liters of cheese, it should retain its heat relatively well. You'll just need to check it every 3 or 4 minutes, see what the temperature looks like in a couple of different spots. And if it's too hot or too cold, simply adjust the temperature on your stove. Once your 20 minutes are over, turn off the heat, and it's time to separate the curds from the whey. For this next step, you will need a very large bowl, a colander or strainer that can fit inside of that bowl, cheesecloth or a nut milk bag. I'm using a nut milk bag partially because they're reusable and partially because I get to say nut milk bag. You also need a ladle and a jar to put your cheese in. Cheesecloth is a lot more fussy to work with. If you're using it, you want to line 2 to 3 layers inside of your colander, and that's going to give you enough resistance to keep the curds but let the whey pass through. In order to have this not fall over, I like to roll down the top a couple times over, and that gives you this nice little collar to keep it standing up. Using your ladle, grab the cheese curds out, and you can see they're very fluffy and jiggly. Pour the curds and whey into your cheesecloth or nut milk bag, and do this for the entire contents of your pot. It smells really nice, like a very warm milk smell. If you run into any issues with the whey draining, you can just give it a little tug and that will help loosen things up. I have basically everything I'm going to get out of the pot. It's mostly just whey left in there. You can decide if you want to leave the whey in the pot or run it through with the rest of your cheese. Now you have a choice about the texture of the final cheese. If you're planning to use this in another cooked application, like on pizza or in a lasagna, you might want to keep a little bit more whey in there, since you'll need that moisture to evaporate later. If you're going to use this as a spread on toast or in a dessert, then you might want it to be a little bit drier. To do that, lift your cheesecloth or nut milk bag and let any excess whey drain. Don't squeeze it, just let it drain out. If you squeeze it, you're going to change the texture. Once you're happy with it, grab your storage container and pour it in. You can see it has a very tender texture. It's very creamy. It's very soft and bouncy. It looks perfect, and I'm so excited to dig into it. What's left over is an acid-based whey. You can use this in a variety of different recipes. Allegedly, you can use it to wash your hair. I don't think I'm gonna do that. You can replace water in bread recipes. You can replace buttermilk in pancakes. Basically, anywhere you would use buttermilk, you can use this whey that's left over. So let's see how it tastes. So good. It has this deep, rich, milky taste, this really soft, melt in your mouth texture, and it's unlike anything you can get at the grocery store. It's so easy and it's so tasty, and I really think you should make this recipe. If you enjoyed this video, please like, please subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.
So it's probably worth sharing.
10 out of 10 would recommend.